Today we're talking about developmental language disorder.
Sponsored by Geldards, leading experts in special educational needs and disability law.
Hi everyone, I'm delighted to have Libby Hill back with me. She's an award-winning speech and language therapist. And today we're going to be talking about DLD. Now, so many people don't know what that is, and understandably so. Developmental language disorder, which is known by other things. And I think it's very, very important that we decipher the terminology and understand exactly what DLD is, how it affects children, and how we can identify needs and meet them. So Libby, thank you again for coming in today. It's wonderful to see you. Now DLD, it's very, very new. It's certainly new to me. I've never heard of it before. Is it known by other names?
Yes, it's certainly not a new phenomena, but the terminology changed fairly recently. So we used to call it specific language impairment.
Okay.
Now, people actually didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
And the powers that be decided, let's look at it in a bit more depth, because previously with specific language impairment, it just had to be a difficulty with language.
Okay.
So language was disordered. So a lot of children have got a language delay and they'll just catch up.
Yeah.
So they're going through the same phases that they would go through, but just going through the process more slowly.
Okay.
So children perhaps who haven't had the right language stimulation will be delayed.
Okay.
And they can catch up and will catch up given the right intervention. But if you've got a disorder, it means that it's not going to plan.
Okay.
So something about it isn't the same as typically developing. So we knew that the language was disordered, but previously we thought that was the only thing that they could have wrong. So their cognitive ability would be fine and their social interaction would be fine. Everything else would be A-OK, just the language. But we realised that actually that wasn't quite as clear-cut as it would appear, because we know that there's lots of overlaps with something that's not following typical patterns. So November 2016, they changed the terminology to call it developmental language disorder. Not sure that's the best term, because if you say developmental, it sounds like something you grow out of.
Yes, yeah.
And you won't grow out of this. But they realise now that you could have other things in your profile. So you could have issues with cognition, you could have issues with, you may be autistic, you could have issues with your social communication. There are other things that will overlap, because if you have a problem with language, it's like the foundation skills for everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you think about education, you need a certain level of language to be able to access everything. So if you were building a wall and that bottom row was a little bit wonky, it's going to have a knock-on effect to everything.
Yes.
So they realised it needed to be greater. But if you look at the statistics, they have stayed the same.
Okay.
So there was a study that Anne Locke did in 2003, and she said 7% of children will have, was SLI, now DLD, and recent studies have shown exactly the same. So this is a huge issue.
Yes.
It means that at least 2 in every class are going to have it, if not 3. But whereas with ASD or PDA, the parents have really pushed that and brought that into the fore. We're not shouting as much about DLD. One of the reasons is because you can hide it better. So what tends to happen, so a bit like you or me, we might know a couple of Russian words, but if you put us in the middle of Russia, we would be looking, well, what is everybody else doing? We'll follow the crowd, we'll fit in there, we'll see what they do then, and we'll do the same. So we can mask it, we can hide it. If, however, they said, okay, can you just write down something, then we'd be like, whoa. So there's a lot of children who, as soon as they begin to put pen to paper, that's when people realise there is a problem. So then, of course, they'll be assessed for dyslexia. Yeah. But actually, the reasons why they are struggling with their written language are the same reasons why they're struggling with their spoken language. So maybe they have difficulty with their phonological awareness. Maybe they can't pick out sounds. So it means that will be harder to learn vocabulary. It will also be much harder when you come to learn to read and to write, because those sounds, you can't pick out the sounds for writing because you can't hear them. So sometimes that's what it is. But auditory memory is also a key part of that. But again, you can hide it in a general instruction. You can't hide it when it comes down to pen on paper. And if you've got an auditory memory of 2, when it comes to spelling, you know, at, well, you either get at or you get ca. You won't get cat. So there's lots of things that they can hide in their spoken language. They can't hide when it comes to written. That's not to say that everybody with dyslexia has developmental language disorder, but there is a huge overlap. Professor Maggie Snowling, who's at York at the moment, has done lots and lots of work on this. And she feels that when someone has dyslexia, it's often the elephant in the room, that nobody's looked at their spoken language. And if we can really target spoken language, then it will have this huge knock-on effect to written language. So developmental language disorder is a specific problem with language. So it could affect your understanding. It could affect your expressive language skills. It could affect your speech and your awareness of sounds. But it could also affect your social communication. Because like us in the middle of Russia, we wouldn't be able to have the same interaction as if we spoke the same language. And so we'd always be on the back foot. So that's the same with developmental language disorder.
I suppose those children are not seeking out those contacts either, are they? Because they must be quite nervous.
Yes, because it is almost like you're not speaking the same language. So there will be that knock-on effect. And studies have shown, studies from the University of Manchester and the University of Sheffield have shown that actually it has a terrible effect on social, emotional, mental health if it isn't addressed. So it's a huge issue that nobody's talking about. So any opportunity to widen the reach is so important, because teachers don't know about it.
No.
And yet they're likely to have these children in their class that are struggling to access the curriculum. They might be hiding it well, hide it in different ways. You know, maybe they're the ones that have become the diversion kings or queens. And diversions come in many forms. It could be verbal, it could be kicking the chair, whatever. So they need to know about these children because it needs to be addressed. And it's the one area of speech and language therapy where there is clear research and clear evidence to say a speech and language therapist needs to assess these children and to work maybe the speech and language themselves on a programme, because that can be effective. Because if you look at the amount of language in a day, it's just phenomenal. You know, so spoken language or written language is massive. So if you've got a problem with that, you are going to struggle.
Of course.
And, you know, it's awful to think of a child struggling when they don't have to.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of families are saying to us that because autism now is so... everybody's looking for it almost. You know, teachers are sort of saying, oh, this child looks anxious. Another word that I don't like but they use is stubborn, avoidant. Could it be autism? Could it be PDA? But they're not talking about DLD enough, are they?
No, they're not. So that would be your go-to. Oh, they must be autistic because they're not following the instructions in the class. They're not making very good eye contact with me. Yeah, they're autistic. But actually, our role, unless we're part of a diagnostic team, shouldn't be to diagnose them or to think we know what's wrong with them. We should just be looking at their profile of strengths, because they will have strengths, and weaknesses. And how can we support them with those weaknesses? Because different personalities cope with difficulty in different ways. So the ones who are stubborn or who do their own thing with DLD, I don't worry about them as much, because they're usually the ones that thought, hang on a minute, there's nothing wrong with me, it's them others. Whereas you will get the ones who've thought, oh my God, I just can't cope with this because I'm not following, and they go into themselves and their anxiety is sky high. So if a child, for whatever reason, is struggling in school, we really need to get to the bottom of that, because we need to be addressing it. And the things that we need to do are not massive, but we need to do them.
Yes, of course. And I think that would be obviously where a referral needs to come in, doesn't it? Particularly as it is more common, I guess, with those figures you mentioned. It's more common in the classroom, really, than autism.
Yes.
So those referrals need to be made.
They do.
And, you know, these children who are struggling, you know, and whether they're showing it by being that stubborn little self, or whether they are going completely into themselves, inevitably it's going to be causing them a trauma, I guess.
Yes, it will. It will be traumatic for them. The ones who are more anxious will feel that more. But it isn't healthy for them.
And left untreated, I mean, that could certainly spiral out of control, really, can't it?
Definitely. But it will have such a knock-on effect to their written language and their school work. Because let's face it, we're not just talking about English here, we're talking about everything. You know, look at maths. Maths is not just your numbers anymore. There's all the language with that. And so you'll be on the back foot for everything. And it's not fair, is it?
No, it's not fair, because actually their understanding might be there.
Yes.
It's just not going in, perhaps, in the right way.
Yes. Or they're not processing language, perhaps, in the same way. Maybe they have a processing delay, so they just need someone just to give them time. So you've asked them a question, but they need time to actually go through their thought processes before they can answer you. So if you know that, then that's what you do.
Yes.
And that makes it so much better.
Of course.
Or maybe so processing delay would be one of the key signs. Another key sign would be a word finding difficulty. Now I know we all get that when we're tired, we have that tip of the tongue, but this is of a clinical nature, and they'll do different things while they're trying to find that word. So they might talk around the word. So maybe they're talking about elephant. So they'll say, oh, you know, that thing with the big ears and the... or maybe they make phonemic errors. So instead of saying radio, they might say radiator.
Yes.
Or the other day, the guy was talking about... I thought he was talking about a ball. He was talking about a bowl. Right. So that was a phonemic error there too. Or they might make semantic errors. So they might say, "Oh, you know, we're sitting on the table," but they meant chair. But it's the one next to them.
That.
Yes.
Yeah.
So sometimes these children are a little bit quirky because they might make their own words up, or they might not have been hearing the word in the same way. So the word that they're telling you is the word that they are hearing it as. So it's complex, but once you know what you need to do, what we do for that is fairly simple.
Oh, that's really good to know. So we're going to be doing more workshops on DLD, Developmental Language Disorder, and it's going to be very much geared towards what the presentations are, you know, what the signs are, and also practical approaches in terms of what you can do at home, what can be done at school, at what stage a speech and language therapist needs to intervene and write the programme, because like you said, it's very, very important that that's specifically done. So please do come along to those workshops. It will be Libby or one of her team members that will be actually leading the workshop. So we would love to see you there. Like we always say with our workshops, they are for parents, carers and professionals. And even better if you can all come together to know that you are fully supporting that child and you're all on the same page. So thank you so much, Libby. It's wonderful to have you here again. If you have any questions about DLD, please do let us know and we can put you in touch with Libby. And we hope to see you again soon.